Hello and welcome to week 7 in the psychology of personality and a challenging chapter because what we're seeing in the work of Viktor Frankl and Rollo May and essentially in existential psychology um, is a deep dive into a lot more philosophical approaches to psychology, different than some of the ways in which we've been exploring personality up until this day. So, within that context, we see a progression of ideas. We see Freud exemplifying the pleasure principle, or the will to pursue pleasure. Then we have Adler, who really talked about power and inferiority and superiority and stuff like that. And then we arrive at Frankl, who's looking at meaning. Now, we have to understand where Viktor Frankl's coming from. Viktor Frankl was in a concentration camp during Nazi Germany and survived that process. And that, of course, his very personality, the constitution of him, is deeply embedded into this theory about having gone through that particular horrendous situation and what it meant for him while that was going on, what he did to survive that psychologically, and then go on to develop a theory of personality based on those observations. So, how do we find meaning is really the purpose of existence. It's the generating force behind moving in the world. It's the motivation, the source of motivation. So similar perhaps to the humanist, and when we look at Maslow's hierarchy, when you think about all those behaviors, our personality shaped by our pursuit of those different needs, recognizing, as I said in the previous lecture, that Maslow felt that rather than us going from stage to stage, the final stage is actually drawing us through those. So the motivation to move through those stages of needs is the innate desire for the highest level within Maslow's hierarchy and even beyond. So pulling us forward. In this sense, when we look at Viktor Frankl, we're looking at a philosophy that encompasses that we are seeking a substantive meaning for our existence. And he felt that was the most important aspect of our psychology. Say, so he felt that one of the ways in which we can do that is through our work. We produce something. That can be, you kind of think of the self-actualized people writing the big book or, becoming, whatever they're going to do and stuff. But it can be raising a family, or it can be just doing really well at your job and being proud of what you do. That those are some of the things that give us meaning. He also talked about meaningful encounters with other people, friendships, personal relationships, intimate relationships, that gives us meaning. And see those, you know, in a way, those are things that we also construct in our lives. So they sort of, have to do with what we do. And we have our collection of people gives us meaning. And then really reflecting his history, as I just said, is choosing how you are going to react when you are in circumstances that are beyond your control. From there, and certainly in his own life, represents a person who decided to have a particular attitude, state of mind, in the face of circumstances completely out of his control. So we see that idea here. Then we look down to discussion A. There's 2 discussions for this week. That's all that's due. On discussion A, I'm asking you to reflect upon experiences you have had, or maybe people that you know have had, that have led to a sense of deeper meaning in their lives. So things that they've done, people that they've encountered and part of their social circle, and then, of course, circumstances beyond their control and the attitudes by which they had approached us, and thinking about those as major milestones in the development of the personality. We then switched to Rollo May, who equally was a philosopher of psychology, and he pointed out, very different than when we were talking about Adler, that this competitiveness that we have to determine where we are in relation to other people, that's not healthy. Not feel that was either he felt it was completely awful, or we were getting way too much into it. Too much of a good thing. Maybe good to have a competitive nature, and when you're playing 3-on-3 basketball, but always trying to be superior at something would be ultimately harmful to our lives. Hostility, again, relating to that era, these individuals grew up during World War II, felt that hostility was one of the worst experiences that people can go through and produced anxiety. And I think probably that is deep on people's minds. War zones, conflicts going all over the world. We're still relatively lucky that there are no ground wars going on in the United States, but certainly lots of strife, lots of anxiety, lots of hostility in terms of how people speak to each other, how they treat each other, things in the news and whatnot can create a great deal of anxiety. And so there we go. Rollo May's particular approach really has to do with embracing someone's self within that context of a highly competitive world with lots of hostility, and making choices with intentionality to be a bringer of good things into the world, essentially. But that the important thing was to be intentional about what you were doing, understanding and having a deep connection to your behavior on an ongoing basis. Now, my own personal practice, my own personal psychological meditation practice, intentionality plays a really, really important part of it. I do trying my best to think through the actions that I take, the things that I say, the influence I can have on other people. In addition to that, also a degree of Zen Buddhism. Zen Buddhism, no expert, but the piece of that pie that I took away was to find myself deeply embedded, grateful for, and intentional about everyday activities. And one of my favorite ones, this is an example, is washing dishes. And when I'm doing that, right, I like washing dishes, like the heat of the water and the visual end product of the dishes being washed. But I try to be in a singular state of mind when I'm focusing on that. Even when I'm doing these videos, there's a certain degree of pushing away everything external to my awareness and being very focused on what it is that I'm doing right now, being very intentional about what I say. A lot. It's probably pretty obvious. I do this on the fly. I'm not reading a script. I'm basically I have notes, and then I try to cover all the things in those notes, but pretty much improvising as I go. And I think one of the ways in which one of the things that I do that allows me to do that is I immerse myself in the process. Try to be very intentional about what I'm doing right here in the moment. So in the second discussion, I'm asking you to consider the notion of intentionality. Now, look at this in two ways. Intentionality, such as kind of what Rollo May was talking about deciding what kind of force you're going to be in the world. And then the part that I talked about, which is a more moment-to-moment sort of way of dealing with anxiety, actually, is to be intensely involved and attentive to the thing that you're doing right now, whatever that thing is. particularly under stress. When and I don't mean stress under threat. Under threat, you're obviously focusing that, but you got a lot of things going on and whatnot, and the spinning around your head. What a relief it is to find yourself focused and just thinking about that one thing, even if it's just for a little period of time. The 15 minutes, 20 minutes it takes me to wash the dishes is a mini vacation. So I encourage you to take from that what you will, and discuss that in the second discussion. So there's 2 discussions. That's all that's due this week. We have personal encounters with Frankel's meaning, and we have intentionality. So talking about those 2 aspects in terms of, and it's personality class. So you want to relate, to what degree have these meaningful things contributed to the person that I am today, and to what degree have I made decisions about to live my life intentionally with particular goals, with particular outcomes of my presence in the world. So great stuff, and I know where some of you are going to go with this. I've watched these discussions happen, and I look forward to them all the time. Doing great work in those, and I think these are going to be very rich discussions. So have at it. So I will see you online. Take much care, and have a great week.